Welcome to Material Girls Long Arm Quilting. I'm Deanna, and this is video 3 in our series about the value of the quilt. If you haven't watched the introduction or video 1 or 2, I would invite you to go have a look at those and check out what we've talked about before. Today is about community giving and involvement. Community involvement is about giving back to the community we call home. And even if it's only for a little while, whether you're living there long term or you're just there for a couple of months while you're doing something, it's always great to give back. It's all about belonging and helping others. This is something that's very important to me, especially since I live in a rural area which doesn't have the same amount of services that a big city does. And being involved in the community is something I really feel passionate about. So you may ask, what do I get out of being involved? Well, I personally get a sense of satisfaction that I'm making a small difference in the world, even if it's only my small area of the world. I get to see something positive come out of what I'm able to share, and this also contributes to my sense of value in myself. I see this in everyone I know who does this kind of work as well, and who gives back and volunteers and does charity work and that sort of thing. They always seem to be just a little bit more compassionate and empathetic towards their fellow man than people who don't do it. So that's kind of a neat observation I've had. Since quilts can also be part of this giving back, quilts have value in giving this sense of worth and satisfaction in their makers. As well, they can also provide a sense of pride in the community and even sometimes within it. Several years ago, Killam, the town that this business is located in, had a milestone celebration. As part of that celebration, a quilt was made that featured blocks that had people's names and businesses' names and their logos and some of the really neat information on it. The names were embroidered, written, or printed on, and it was such a lovingly created quilt. Definitely not perfect, but had a wealth of character and information about that time. It was raffled for money that went to a great cause in the community. And the winner of the raffle stored it for quite some time, and several years later it was discovered. And because of what the quilt was, it was brought to Crafty Creations, where Material Girls is located, to see if the owner knew of someone who could use the quilt. She's well known for knowing a lot about history in the community and being very involved. So the people that found it thought that she would be a good person to work with and see who could benefit from this quilt. Those of us who were in the shop that day were just oohing and awing and reminiscing about some of the businesses that were on the quilt and what's there still there and what businesses have moved on in that time. And it was really a neat experience to have to see some of that history. We also shared stories about some of the individuals whose names were on that quilt. Charlene, who owns Crafty Creations, went to work figuring out where this quilt could be appreciated. After some time investigating and talking to others in the community, it was decided that there was room for it in the local hospital. It could be hung there for all to enjoy and see a piece of the town's history, because it also had a little thing in it that talked about what event it was made for. What a great thing to commemorate the history of the town and to give pride for all who made a contribution in any way. It's a great gift for the person who organized and sewed the quilt to give to the town. These kind of projects are valued for what they give back, not so much the precision for how perfect they look or how perfectly pieced they are. If you think back and look at any quilts that you've seen in museums, they're not always perfect either, but we sure treasure them. So never be afraid to show your generosity with a gift like that. Nobody will judge you, and if it's perfect, then wonderful, and if it's not perfect, it still has a great value. So this is one of the values of quilting and doing a quilt. There's so much need out there in other ways as well. Create something that helps others in your smaller, wider community. Homeless people, low-income people, house fire victims, crime victims, kids that have just been put into foster care, people going through trauma and needing help, refugees, and many more possibilities. Some of the events in our relatively local area that have been supported in the past little while have been things like the Humboldt tragedy. There was a lot of quilts made for the families in that. The Fort McMurray wildfires, there were so many quilts sent up to the families from Fort McMurray who lost all their homes. And currently we are creating quilts for Ukrainian refugees. There's always an ongoing need by people such as the low income and homeless. They're in need of warmth, to sleep, to watch TV, to cover a bed or the floor depending on their situation, and it can be even just to protect them from the elements. Children removed into foster care also need the help of quilters. These kids are going through a traumatic situation, and giving them something to call their own, especially if they had to leave with nothing to their name, can really make a difference for them. Fire and police departments carry quilts for roadside emergencies, as well as other situations where people might need a quilt. Some of these even can be from one of our charities that we support called Bags of Love. Pet rescue groups are also in need of bedding for the animals that they take care of. And if you have an old blanket or something, they would appreciate that. If you really don't like how well your piecing is and you don't think it's suitable for some of these other purposes, that's a place that it can go to. There are many more organizations that can benefit from an ongoing gift and have an ongoing need for quilts. Organizations that can benefit from our creations include Bags of Love and Blankets for Canada. These are two that are near to my heart, as I personally know people that are involved and in working for them, and I hear the stories of the impact that they can have with what may seem to many like a little small gift. My friend, who does a lot of charity quilting, told me these next two stories about the impact of this work. She said, "I enjoy making quilts and make many community quilts in a year for donations. It's very rewarding. One morning when I was on a bus in Edmonton and a lady with a stroller and a tiny baby under a quilt came into the bus, the corner of the quilt flipped up and displayed our label from our organization in that corner. I knew it was a quilt from one of us, perhaps me, perhaps a friend. It was so emotionally exciting for me to see my quilt in action. A personal thank you without a word spoken. Isn't that an awesome, heartwarming story? She doesn't even have to be thanked personally to see the impact. I just thought I'd show you one of the quilts that we have here waiting to be quilted. This is a signature quilt from Bags of Love, and that's the pattern that they give to people that are sewing for them and don't know what else they want to do. It's just kind of an idea of what you can make, and it all has this nice central image in it that has the borders around it, and it looks really nice, and it's amazing what you can do. You can make it a little kiddish or for the older teenagers or whatever, depending on what fabric you have and what colors you have, and it's a very nice quilt to use. We provide kits for that for a lot of people in the area to sew up and bring back to us, and we have seen over 100 quilts go through this store so far this year. So it's something that we're very proud to be part of, both as Material Girls and Crafty Creations. Another story of my friend gave me was that she said, through the same organization, I also heard of two little boys who had received quilts from our group. They have been shuffled from home to home, and it was to happen once again. They just received their quilts that month, and the little boys held hands, stepped forward, and said with tears in their eyes, "Can we please keep our quilts?" All they were concerned about in going from one place to the next was a continuation of that quilt moving with them forward in their lives. It really reinforces to us that a quilt is indeed a hand from an unknown person holding their hand as they move forward through this tough, tough world they're in. This story brought me to tears. It could have been one of my quilts. Again, such a touching story, and the impact that charity quilts and charity giving can have on some of these people that really have nothing. I've heard many other stories and could talk about this for quite some time, but your time is valuable to me, so I'll leave you with just these two for now. Perhaps I'll have a chance to share more with you in future videos. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to hear more of these stories. I will also post a link for some more information on Blankets for Canada and Bags of Love in the description below. So if you want to know more, you can click on those links. There may even be a chapter near where you live, and you could get involved as well. Other organizations that I know about that help people and have a need for quilts includes youth shelters, women's shelters, teen pregnancy organizations. Blankets for Canada supports one of these, and the neat one about that one is that they work with both the moms and the dads, something I'd never thought of before. I never thought of the dads also needing support. Bissell Center, Hope Mission, drug abuse organizations that have rehab programs. I've even heard of people graduating the program and getting a quilt. Something like this would be a really nice, this is upside down, nice quilt to give to somebody. This one is a more masculine quilt. Wouldn't that be nice to have given to you? This one's just waiting to be bound before it goes off to its home. Halfway houses for drug and alcohol recovery, they can use these kind of supports. Babies and Beyond. The Red Road Healing Society, which is aimed at Indigenous peoples. Little Warriors. The Stollery Children's Hospital, or the Children's Hospital that is where you live. The Oak Hills Boys Ranch. Hospital programs that receive quilts to wrap stillborn babies in. That's something that so few of us think about unless we've had that happen in our lives. The Herbs Jameson Center, which is a men's shelter. We can also give quilts to those with serious illnesses, whether they come from churches or other groups. The quilts, I mean, not the people. Because there are places like churches and other groups that collect those, and then that can be passed on. Making quilts can also be crafting therapy. This can be for yourself or as an organized activity for those that are going through difficult times. It helps people get through their own trauma, get through the loss of loved ones, including pets, help with mental health, and so much more. Another way to give back is to sew for veterans and help bring comfort to them. A friend of mine told me this story about one of the quilts her friends made. She said, "A friend of mine made her first quilt of valor once, and when she took it in to donate, it was then informed of the parameters and colors that she should have done it in. But they did accept the quilt. She went home a little disappointed in herself for not doing better research and so forth, and was a little bit let down. Then the newspaper picked up the story on her quilt and the recipient. The recipient was so thrilled to get the quilt because it was in the colors of his family and he's tartan, and he was ecstatic that it was made absolutely with him in mind. My friend, of course, was then just beaming with pleasure that she was so happy. It was meant to be. Sometimes these little goof-ups are just the creators and the universe's way of bringing things together. And it's so amazing when you hear about those things. If you think back to the first story I told you today, you'll recall that we commemorate special events in our lives and our communities with quilts, such as a special family reunion. We can note historical happenings such as 100th anniversary of a town, or even global events like the pandemic. The resulting quilts or quilted projects usually end up being displayed in the community for all to enjoy and to remember in the future. Sometimes they even end up in museums where generations down the line we can look at them and marvel over what our ancestors did. What charity or community projects are you involved in? Are there any that are special to your community? Please share them in the comments or email me. I would love to read them and share with others. It's always wonderful to see what others have done or been a part of. You might even inspire somebody else to start in working on charity and community events. You can always help my channel by subscribing and clicking the like button. It really does help me out. Join me next time as I talk about the love that is sewn into every stitch of a quilting project.